Hello, hello, we're live. Look who's here right from the start tonight, which means she might wander off at some point. But it's Mimsy Show. Okay, let's bring the chat up. And hi, Luke, how are you doing? First one to pop into the chat. Sorry, I shouldn't have given her any attention. Now she just demands attention. I'm just going to switch my phone. Oof. There we go. Ugh. So, okay, so it's everyone's favorite cat show. Let's see what everyone is up to this fine evening. Yes, it's almost the end of a short working week for me. It was a public holiday on Monday here, so the week seems to have gone by quickly. Oh, it looks like Mimsy's gonna settle on down, have herself a quiet old time, as is only fair. She's an old cat. Hey, Justin and Miss Voxification. Yes, Mistress M replaced by Miss Mimsy. And hey, Miss 309, how's it going? It's a fun and exciting time we live in, isn't it? With so many things happening. My little fruit cup with me. Hey, Charlie. And Mimsy will say hello, I'm sure. Yes, no, the cat's on her tower rather than in the cradle. I didn't think she'd be in here because I saw her a bit earlier sitting on my bed like she was sleeping, and I thought she might have settled in, but no, she wandered out. So here she is joining us for an evening of fun and frivolity. I'm just thinking, yes. All right. Okay, this is an old envelope that had hate mail in it once. Who's under here? I think I've got to remember next time AngryAussie's here that I actually got a Christmas card for him. So that's my Christmas card from Franklin, one of my oldest YouTube friends, which I opened on a printer. And that's the, yeah, envelope of weird shit. School holiday program. This is all weird shit that got mailed to me. There was some hate mail in one of them, which was fun. I haven't had any mail for a little while, Luke, and I didn't realize this stuff was still sitting here. This is a letter that I didn't read because he went into all sorts of racist shit. But I do just like, dear AngryAussie, I fucking hate you, and I hope you know that. You do, you now do. That's all I wanted you to know. But since that would make a pointlessly short letter, I will write more. I love that someone obsessively went to this trouble and I've never read it. I think this is one of the religious ones. No, that's another hate mail letter. Or is it? Oh yeah, the problem with progressives. That's the one where he gets really racist. Okay, that's a religious one. Should look this. I think there was a Christmas card for AngryAussie there. I'll have to try and find it. Yes, Miss Foxification, as you say, if I need somewhere to live, I'm already living in their head. Rent-free, rent-free. Patman Sport, how's it going, buddy? All good. And hey, Chronic, how are you doing? So is there more under there? Probably. I think there's some more religious stuff under there. Oh well, can stay like under a rock like it deserves to be. Or should I? I mean, on the one level, it's funny. It's funny that there's all this that I haven't read. But it might be funny to read out loud how deranged this person actually is. Justin, do I get fan mail? I get nice mail sometimes. I get cards and nice mail sometimes. So let's see. So Mr. Serena Williams controversy. I don't know what controversy we're talking about. With Serena Williams, that could actually mean a bunch of different things. You know, you could be talking about the wildly racist cartoon done in Australian media. This endless cycle we have in Australian media. Someone says something or produces something wildly racist, and then it isn't just that they blithely assert it's not racist. It's that then they act like the wronged party. You've wounded them. You've wounded them ever so badly by calling them racist, despite the fact they so clearly are. Like whether it was Kerry-Ann Kennelly saying mindless, ignorant shit about Aboriginal communities, or that newspaper cartoonist doing a fucking minstrel show representation of Serena Williams. It's weird as fuck. Oh look, I know Facebook was down for most of the day, and there were some Australian media reports saying people were calling Triple O. I take that with a grain of salt. If an official spokesperson from emergency services fronted up and said, yeah, that happened and it was bad because it wastes our time, that would be one thing. But if it's just some talking head on TV saying, people are calling Triple O to say Facebook down's an emergency, it's just because that's popped up in the news before. I think they say it. They don't bother to verify it. They don't need a source. It's like someone on the internet says it, and the media just regurgitate it. And of course, because there's people on the internet now, and I may or may not be guilty of doing similar things, who write an exceptionally stupid thing in a trolley way to see if anyone falls for it. One of my favorite was during the marriage equality postal survey in Australia. Someone worked out the shitty envelopes they gave you to send back your vote in. You just hold them up to the light and you could see straight in, you could see what the vote was, which is not a good thing. And then some lad wanting a bit of banter on interwebs goes on Twitter and he shows a picture, because we're all seeing it. It was the picture, if you put a light to it, like just a torch behind it, and you could see what someone's vote was. And he posted a picture of that, like showing you could see the vote. And he said, like he said he worked in post distribution center somewhere, and he goes, I'm really enjoying checking every marriage equality vote and throwing out all the no votes. This guy did not work in the post office. He did not work in a distribution center, but he just knew that would wind people up if he said that. And people took the bait and they were foaming at the mouth and bloody, 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 blah. And as people would literally try hunt this person down, arrest them. Really, it's a fucking joke. I don't work at the post office. Yes, as we're noting, if people want to criticize Serena Williams' behavior, it's nothing compared to what the male players do. Oh, God, 15 years ago, Miss Fox, God, the 80s, John McEnroe, Ilie Nastase, they were just awful. And you can see it time and time again. It's not that like Venus Williams' on-court behavior is flawless, but the sort of calls made against her, it's such a clear double standard in that the male behavior is way worse. It's like this stupid, and with a lot of people it's unconscious. They don't even realize they're doing it. But it's this stupid attitudinal double standard, like a woman who tells people what to do is bossy, and that's a negative. A man who tells people what to do is assertive, and he's a leader. You know, a man who makes jokes in a workplace, he's a laugh riot. He's the life of the party. A woman who makes jokes at work is called unprofessional. It's stupid how often people do it, and they're not even conscious of it. Yeah, Charlie Djokovic destroyed his racket, and honestly, it's not just sexist. There's the Aussie tennis player that the media love to hate, and I'm blanking on his name because I'm not that interested in sport, but it's basically because he's not Caucasian, and every tiny little thing he does is scrutinized and blown out of all proportion. His reaction to things is regularly, blatantly misrepresented. And that's it, Nick Kyrgios. Thanks, Batman. Yeah. And the lashing out at him, it's clearly because of his family's ethnicity, and because he won't be the forelock tugging, thankful that I'm in Australia boy. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the double standard, yeah, it's incredibly obvious. It's like, I mean, I was posting a thing on social media today, that American actor, Jussie Smollett, who faked an attack on himself. I mean, what a fuckhead, right? He's a dickhead. He's going to be... The idea they appear to be trying to get him for multiple felonies, which seems a bit extreme. I mean, yeah, sure, absolutely. Fine him for wasting police time. But there's this absolute brain-dead little toad who's a Trump sycophant who thinks he's a real provocateur. It's like all these right-wing... I say that loosely because people on conservative side of politics, being conservative in politics doesn't mean you're by definition a bad person. There are people who espouse conservative politics who do it from a place of integrity. But the ones who grab the public spotlight, they're just grifters. It's not that I disagree with them, although I obviously do, but they're con artists. They're grifters. They don't mean anything they do. And they never get called on their lies. And so they just continue to lie because there's no repercussions. When they launch an attack, it doesn't have to mean anything. And it's a competition in this mob, and they're mainly American, although we've got some real fucking sad acts in Australia who are mimicking it, who are desperate for attention. But the ones in America, it's like a real struggle to identify who is like the most evil, who's the sickest and most fucked up. But it's also a challenge to identify the one who's the most stupid. Although I think we could probably crown a guy called Jacob Wall as the most stupid because he's such an obvious grifter. He's so clearly making shit up, and he does it really pathetically. Like, he had this whole thing where he's going like, oh, this private security company found all this stuff. Well, and they've got the real dirt on Robert Mueller. We're going to have this woman come forward and testify that Robert Mueller sexually assaulted her. It's like, and it was all completely fake. Like, he faked up a website for this security company, and the staff photos were all either stock photos or they'd been lifted from things like the Internet Movie Database, like they were actors. One of them, I'm trying to remember who it was, but one of them was actually quite well known, which was a really stupid thing to do. And this idiot Jacob Wall is trying to say that, you know, this is a, you know, like in Israel, they're obsessed with Israel and the Mossad. They're the real badasses. So he's like, this is like an Israeli ex-Mossad intelligence agency, and it was all fake. And the website was registered to Jacob Wall's mum's home. No, it was a phone number. There was a contact phone number, and it went to voicemail, and it was his mum's phone number. And that was dumb. And like, because he's basically been threatening, well, he's pushing a fraudulent scheme against investigator Robert Mueller, but he's now being found out making fake death threats against himself, setting up fake Twitter accounts that threaten to murder him, and then taking it to the police to try and. So why is he not getting the same treatment that Jussie Smollett got? Jussie Smollett at least carried it through to have someone punch him, like not badly, but he, you know, committed to the act and got punched. This Jacob Wall turd filed a police report saying, look, here are death threats against me. And he'd done them with fake Twitter accounts. Why the fuck is he not facing felony charge? In fact, I reckon he is ending up in jail. He's going to end up, because he's just stupid. Yes, Chronic, he's a Shapiro slime type, except he's even dumber than Shapiro, which is a fucking accomplishment. It's probably the only thing that separates them. Ideologically and behaviorally, they're virtually the same. But Wall is definitely more stupid because he keeps coming up with these utterly fucking ridiculous scams that anyone can see through. And he keeps making a complete fucking fool of himself publicly. And I reckon clock is ticking. I think he's already crossed the line and he keeps getting away with it. I don't know, maybe because he's white. But I reckon he is so stupid, he'll end up getting convicted of a felony, I would imagine, because he's just that stupid. There's that whole circle of those right-wing provocateurs in the US who just lie. They stage things, they make things up, they edit videos of people to make false narratives. They just lie. It's their default mode because they've never faced any consequences for lying and scamming. It's going to catch up with them. Oh, absolutely, Chronic. Rich parents. Hey, Toronto Maple Leafer, how you going? As always, Justin, us speaking about, yeah, rich parents bribing their kids' ways into uni. That is weird as fuck. What? And it is. It's not the education, because if the kids are too stupid to get into university with all the benefits they already have, and you have to bribe their way in, they're not going to do well at university. They're not going to become accomplished. They're not going to become scholars. It's the network. It's who's at those universities and colleges, rich, connected white people. It's just about entrenching the power structure. They're not doing it to get an education, because these kids aren't going to get a fucking education because they're not fucking bright enough to. It's about the network. It's about the connections. It's about the power structures. It's absolutely ridiculous. Oh yes, see, misfoxification, that is the shifty but legal thing. Really rich people are making donations, buying a library or whatever. But this mob, I don't know why they didn't do that. They didn't have enough money to impress that way. They were only bribing hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of millions of dollars. It's absolutely absurd. The whole thing's a farce. It's like all these people go about, oh, it's a meritocracy. All you need to get ahead is good old hard work. It's like, fuck no. No, it's corruption, and it's a power network. I mean, I cracked up a few years ago. Yeah, I'm sure I've mentioned this before. There was an Indian entrepreneur who'd done quite well in Silicon Valley, and I'm blanking on his name. But yeah, he was asked to, I think write a column on what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur. What does it take? What does it take to succeed? You're one of the kings of Silicon Valley. What does it take? And he said, and his lead-in was be white and come from wealth. That's of the success stories. There's all this bullshit about it's hard work, it's seeing it through, it's dedication. It's bullshit. The overwhelming majority of success stories come from men who are white and born into wealth. And that's the thing. It's not saying that a lot of these guys don't work hard, because a lot of them do. The Apple founders worked a long time. Microsoft, they worked long and hard. A lot of these entrepreneurs do work long and hard, but because they're born into wealth, they have a safety net. They can take risks. You always hear the Silicon Valley thing, oh, you've got to be able to fail. You've got to have the courage to fail. You don't learn if you don't fail. And it's because these fuckers have so much wealth behind them, they can fail 10 times in a row and they still have money. Working class people don't have that fucking luxury. You don't have any luxury at all. You've got to slave away just to keep your head above water. This idea that these people who become billionaires, it's all about merit. Fuck that. It's about the fact they had wealth. They were born into wealth. They had protection. They had connections. And this whole thing about merit, it's a meritocracy. Absolute horseshit. Toronto Maple Leaf, what's luxury? You're asking sarcastically or seriously? I mean, luxury is not having to worry that you'll have somewhere to live. Luxury is not having to worry about your family eating. Luxury is not having to worry if you get sick, your whole world will collapse. It's so fucking, yeah, Mr. N, like when I made the video about Kylie Jenner being a self-made billionaire. First, she's not a billionaire. She's not a billionaire. That's just a media release hype. But she's not self-made. She's born into wealth, and she's not working. She's got an entire industry using her as a figurehead. It's just like, holy fuck. And every time you read one of these stories, because look, anyone anyone young who's not born into wealth knows with like the out of control real estate prices, the chances of you owning your own home seem very slim indeed. But then there's always these stories about this 20-something who owns 3 properties. Find out how they did it. And it's like, oh, I worked so hard. And, da, da, da. And then it's like, and I lived rent-free at my parents' place. Oh, and my grandfather gave me $40,000 for a down payment on my first apartment. And it is always, the secret is other people's money. And it's just like, I'm not saying, you know, we should drag them all out into the public square and hang them from the light posts. I'm not saying that either. It's just like, but it's just such a line of bullshit. And I wouldn't mind it so much if there wasn't so much bullshit. Yeah, and Oprah is an interesting case, and she clearly had a lot working against her, and she did not have family wealth or family connections working in her favor. But it's almost like I don't think that's what anyone here is doing, but you'll get people who are defending this system who will hold up the 1 in 100 million, you know, oh, Oprah, therefore it's okay for everyone. No, it fucking isn't. There's all these systems in place to keep people down. Without these constraints, there would be thousands more people who weren't born into wealth doing really well. But people can't afford to do anything but work at shitty jobs, because if the money flow stops for 1 week, they're fucked. Oh, Chronic, is Yang really pushing universal basic income? Ah, I didn't know. That's why he's popular on Reddit. Okay. Big boy, MJ fans hating on Oprah. Did Oprah speak out against Michael Jackson? Did she? Ah, pity she didn't do it while he was alive. Yeah, there are very few people, like proportionally, people who've watched that Leaving Neverland doco. Seems like the overwhelming majority of people who watch it, it's like, if they didn't already think Jackson was a child abuser, it's like the scales fall from their eyes and they're like, oh, fuck, I had no fucking idea it was that bad. It's kind of like everyone knew he was doing it. It's interesting, someone on my Facebook page today saying, because I was talking about the double standards with Jussie Smollett and this Jacob Wohl fuckwit. And someone said, the double standards everywhere. It's like everyone's, you know, rightly down on Michael Jackson and R. Kelly, but then she runs off a few that have seem to have been given a free run, like Woody Allen and David Bowie. She Elvis, and I thought, Elvis, what's the gripe with Elvis? And saying where he started grooming Priscilla when she was like 14. I was like, oh, I forgot how young Priscilla was. Yeah. Oh, and talking about racism in Elvis's past, going, well, for that time in history, for someone from like Tennessee, Elvis was very unracist. Obviously, he worked with a lot of black musicians. Of course, a lot of people point out that he, you know, basically stole black music and profited from it. The people he was taking it from weren't profiting from it. I know there was a famous incident, I think it was at one of his Vegas shows, when Elvis said some really awful racist things towards his backup singers on stage, and it went down like he thought he was being funny, and it went down like a lead balloon, and they almost walked out on him. Though I know there were definitely incidents in Elvis's past, but it's like Lion Spider, yes. There's a huge double standard in Australia at the moment. Conservatives who vilified the Safe Schools program, saying it was all grooming children. And I will never forgive them for that, because Safe Schools is an incredibly important education program that helped so many kids. Because I had kids at school when that was coming out, and they were relating to me how it was working and how much it helped a lot of kids. And when these pieces of shit vilified Safe Schools, and then these same people actively, aggressively defend convicted child rapist Cardinal Pell, who has a career of protecting other child rapists, and they keep blithely spouting, oh, there's this out of control child abuse in Aboriginal communities, so they sent in the fucking army. And then the investigations go, well, no, there's not. There actually isn't. There are incidents of abuse, and every incident of abuse is important, but it is not exceptionally higher than in urban communities. Big Boy, it was called Safe Schools, SAFE. It was a health and sex education class designed to help kids understand sexuality, and understand sexuality other than heterosexuality as well. So it tried to get kids to empathize with kids who might be gay or bi or trans. And that was one of the weirdest, most fucked up things they did, because there were empathy exercises, and it was like, well, imagine you were gay, and you just kept hearing people who said they weren't who said they're not homophobic, but they keep using fag as an insult. They keep using gay as an insult. Imagine yourself in that situation and how it would feel, and how you would feel about other people. And these creepy motherfuckers took that imagine you were gay and implied kids were being forced to role play, and they had to act gay, suck dicks or whatever. And it's just like, you sick motherfuckers. Saying empathy is evil. Miss Foxification, there were problems in Aboriginal communities. It's just not that much higher than the problems in urban communities. As the thing, the idea that it was rampant and out of control and everywhere was proven to be a lie. It was absolutely proven to be a lie. But yeah, there definitely were instances of abuse, neglect and abuse, and those are bad things that need to be done. Hey, Grant, you want me to pat Nipsey? She's... She wasn't completely okay with me doing that. No, she's settling down again. Oh, look at her. She's being super cute. And hey, David, how's it going, buddy? Oh, God, chronic. School sex ed can be so. You had a gym coach who was too shy. I mean, the thing is, if you gave kids real, practical, useful sex education, you'd probably get arrested. Like if you told them the stuff they wanted to know, told them stuff they needed to know, people would call you a predator and you'd get arrested. So you get this weird clinical education that misses the mark as often as it hits it. Once, but you had a science teacher who would sneak in proper sex education to counter the Catholic school. Ah, is it Toronto Maple Leaf? Your sex ed curriculum updated in 1999, updated to today by the Liberals. Ah. Oh, yeah. Well, hey, Toronto Maple Leaf, speaking about your conservative politics there in Canada, you get to look forward to a future Prime Minister, Jordan Peterson, because he obviously wants to get into politics. He wants to control other people's lives. He wants his doctrines being legislated. He hasn't really focused on it recently. It was more obvious about 2 years ago with Jordan Peterson having aspirations with the Canadian Conservative Party. I think he's worked out that his daddy to all the Lost Boys shtick makes him more money. So he's sticking with that at the moment. And he's another one who bugs the shit out of me, okay? Okay, it's not like he's unintelligent, but he's turned his platform into a grift, and he's another one who just shamelessly lies, absolutely shamelessly lies, even just on little things. Like he was on Q&A here in Australia a couple of weeks ago. I don't watch Q&A generally because it aggravates me and I fucking hate the host and I don't want to throw things at my own TV. So I really didn't watch it when Jordan Peterson was on it. But I did see some grabs because it was all over YouTube and whatnot. And on the scale of things, it was a little thing, but it was just such a blatant lie. It really upset me. He's saying to the feminists, like, you know, you're saying masculinity is toxic and that's evil and wrong. And the woman's going, no, that isn't what anyone's saying. We're talking about a particular brand of behavior that's done in the name of masculinity that's damaging to both men and women. We're not saying men and masculinity is toxic. There is a particular sort of extreme behavior that is very destructive that we call toxic masculinity. And Jordan Peterson is pretending he doesn't know that's what toxic masculinity is. He's going, no, you're just saying that all men and all masculinity is toxic. And it's like, it's a little lie, but it's still a really annoying lie. Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. But yeah, like if those fucking right-wing provocateurs really had so much to say, why do they base everything on lies? It's like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Oh God, we're all calling out former school teachers and principals who were pedos, yeah, or sex offenders or whatever. I'm trying to think, because I went to Catholic school. I was an altar boy. I don't think there were, no, okay, I'll change it from, I don't think so. I know there were no controversies in my town. That doesn't mean nothing happened, just meant it wasn't public knowledge. And in all the inquiries, I've never heard like my hometown mentioned. So I don't know, dodged a bullet, I guess. I don't even remember any teachers getting into trouble. And teachers get into trouble semi-regularly. Yes, David, things like the high male suicide rate that MRAs say they care about, that's a direct product of what we call toxic masculinity, the idea that men have to be forced into incredibly small, narrow definitions of what it is to be a man. And that's largely don't show emotion, don't show affection, never ask for help, never say you're having trouble, and definitely don't be gay. And it's just like, if you tell people they can't express the normal human range of emotions, it's going to fuck them up. Oh yeah, Toronto Make Believe. I shared that. Someone said it on Twitter, and I just thought that was so useful. I shared it to Facebook. It's basically because it's an increasing tactic of some of these particularly nasty right-wingers like Tommy Robinson, either trying to cause trouble in public and recording it, or actually doing live streams. If you want to fuck them up, hopefully you have something on you that can play music loud enough. Play copyrighted music, then they can't use the video. And if they have, if they're live streaming, if you're really lucky, it'll get their channel shit canned, because YouTube's live streaming is definitely, the content recognition will pick up copyrighted music being played and it will cut the live stream. So that's a little non-violent tactic. If you're ever faced with one of these dickheads trying to cause a scene and either record it on video or live stream it, play copyrighted music as loud as you can, and they can't use it. And as an added bonus, they might get the old copyright strike and not be able to live stream anymore. Mr. O'Neill, Mad Max Fury Road was practically a perfect feminist movie to fight toxic masculinity. It was practically a perfect movie. That movie is so good. I've watched it so many times. And someone on Twitter last week did a little like GIF essay, like a Twitch stream, a lot of quite long, high quality GIFs of stuff. He's talking about how good the cinematography is in Fury Road and the editing. That was another thing. You read the history of Fury Road, there's no way it should have been a good movie. Like, it was in development hell for a decade. They tried to get it made for over a decade. It went through so many mutations. Do you know there wasn't a script for it? I mean, the actors had their dialogue printed out, but it was visually storyboarded. It wasn't typed up like a script. And then the polecats come in and they're swinging back and forth and it's mental as fuck. They visually storyboarded it, and then they shot from the storyboards. There was a script in as much as the actors had written dialogue to do. But normally a script is, the whole movie is written, but the visuals for Fury Road weren't in the script. It was completely storyboarded, thousands of individual storyboards. So it was in development hell for 10 years. They fucking changed the lead. Like, instead of Mel Gibson being Max, now it's Tom Hardy, who was great. And they shifted focus. So Max was basically a supporting character and Furiosa was the lead. And yeah, and it was, it was all about the toxic masculinity. Immortan Joe fucking up the war boys and never giving him a chance, never giving anyone a chance to live their life, treating the women like possessions. And another thing, Fury Road was edited by George Miller's wife, and she had never edited an action film before. So we think of all the absolutely wild stuff they shot, and the majority, I mean, they did do post-production for bigger explosions and whatnot, but all those crashes they did for real. They did physical stunts. They built those fucking vehicles and then crashed them. And the polecats, those dudes, I think they were Cirque du Soleil people. They were really on those fucking poles on moving vehicles. They really did that. And so there's all those wild shots, and she'd never edited an action film together and put it together into a piece of fucking magic. And yes, the original Mad Max movies, the trilogy, were all shot in Australia. I think a lot of the first Mad Max movie was shot outside of Melbourne. Road Warrior, Mad Max 2, was out around Burke, and Beyond Thunderdome was also out in the desert somewhere. I think because Fury Road ended up being shot somewhere in Africa, and I think it's because they wanted to shoot it in Australia, but there'd been more rain than usual in the location they were going to use, so it was too green. It didn't look as deserty, so they had to get another location. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's why it was shot where it ended up being shot. Yeah, so what a day, what a lovely day. That was beautiful. The War Boys and the spraying the silver stuff on their teeth, shiny and chrome. That's a food product. That's for cakes and stuff, spraying cakes. If just for a laugh, you can buy that stuff like on eBay and on Amazon, I think. Look up like silver cake spray, and you can buy it. But you always get the buyer reviews or questions, and there's like a Q&A bit, and the seller just ended up rolling with it after a while. Like, I'm sure they didn't know what was going on at once. People were writing questions. Will this product get me to the gates of Valhalla? Will I ride shiny and chrome? And they just ended up going with it and replying with Mad Max quotes. It's good for a laugh, actually. Yeah, Toronto Maple Leaf. Occasionally, it rains in the desert, and it gets very verdant when it does for a short time. Hey, Keiko, how's it going? Yes, Mimsy's been cute. She's having a little snooze now. I could annoy the crap out of her by poking her, but I won't. Yes. She had a little pat and a scratch earlier, and then she was facing the other way, and I sort of pat her, and she did a big meow, but then curled up, and she's facing this way, being cute. Hey, Safa, how's it going? Oh, yeah, David, the whole thing with religion with the cars was great. Fucking everything about Fury Road is so good. And what's weird, when you just explain the story, it's like it shouldn't be that entertaining. It's go, well, okay, they go, and she drives a truck and tries to get away, and then a bunch of people chase her, and she does get away, and she finds some people that were supposed to be a salvation, but that's all gone to hell. So then they get back in the truck, and they turn around and go back the other way, and then the same guys chase them. And that's it. That is basically it. And yet it's one of the most fucking amazing movies ever. I love that movie so much. I'm trying to think, was that the one I had a guy walk out in? I think it was Fury Road. You know, when the MRAs had decided it was anti-male and whatnot, and they were super upset, and no one paid any fucking attention to them because the movie was so good. I went and saw it in Gold Class. For those who don't know what that is, it's a chain of cinemas here. Well, a lot of them, they have like the luxury screenings, and so it's a relatively small number of seats, depending on the cinema, between like 20 and 40 seats, but they're huge, plush, super comfy recliners, and you can order really good quality food to be brought into you during the movie. So it's like a date experience. I did it with Mrs. Angry. We went and saw Captain Marvel last weekend, which was quite enjoyable in Gold Class. But I went and saw Fury Road, and it costs more than twice as much as a normal cinema ticket. And I went and saw Fury Road in gold class. This dude did a walkout in it. I'm sure he wanted people to pay attention, but he actually, I don't know, somewhere during the movie, he still went, like he's making his big protest and walking out. I was like, dude, they got your fucking money. No one gives a shit if you walk out. Oh, we've got fans of Alita Battle Angel. I might watch that at some point. Okay, I do remember Tom Hardy fielding super stupid questions from reporters. Did he feel outgunned by the estrogen? No, it's just like, did you not watch the movie? It's just like, fuck, it's amazing. It gave the character of Max so much depth and still left a bunch of mystery, like all his flashbacks and hallucinations. Something had happened that went very wrong. Clearly he was with some people that he thought he could protect, and he failed and they all died, and that's traumatized him, and he still has hallucinations of them. It's just wild that they gave him this backstory but left a whole bunch of mystery in it as well. It's great. But yeah, I hope they do another one at some point. It was so good. And exactly, Kate, as you say, women suffer through films that are 99% men forever. You get these people who are from a privileged class, and that's me, straight white male. You know, I have very few barriers in life. But you get these people who, when they've been a member of a privileged class for so long, and it isn't just that everyone else had no privilege, you know, they were exploited and abused, sometimes literally in terms of slavery, but otherwise just generally with societal controls holding people down. And the idea of those people being released from that abuse, escaping that abuse, and move towards parity, it's like Scott Morrison's dumb as fuck. Like, yeah, we want women to do better, but not at the expense of men. It's just like, motherfucker, if a group that is not everyone gets all the benefit for so long, when everyone else says, let's even it up a bit, of course this group that's always had everything is going to get less, because that's fair. It's like so fucking ridiculous. I do try not to flaunt my privilege. The worst bit of flaunting of privilege is pretending it doesn't exist. Absolutely ridiculous. So, Spider, I liked Wonder Woman. Mrs. Angry still prefers Wonder Woman's her favorite of the comic movies. Like Captain Marvel, but she still prefers Wonder Woman. I probably preferred Captain Marvel. I like Wonder Woman. I think it has some really good stuff in it. Not 100% with the ending of it, but yeah. White male. So here's the thing. I'm always really wary. Like, you get these guys who call themselves male feminists, and you even get some women who talk about allies and supporters will call them feminists. I don't use that term on myself. I'm just trying to be a decent fucking human. Because look, okay, I support Indigenous rights in Australia, which I do. I'm not an Indigenous activist. I support Indigenous activists. So, and look, to an extent, this is just semantics, and it's not that important. But when people say, do you call yourself a feminist? And go, I don't, because I'm not a woman. So I support the cause of feminism. I support feminists as much as I can. I don't call myself a feminist because I'm not a woman. And then, yeah, like I said, on one level, that's just semantics and it's not that important. But it's my personal feeling. Again, I don't rag on guys who call themselves male feminists. I don't rag on women who call male supporters feminists. Just my personal thing. Yeah, ally. I'm fine with being an ally. I'm fine with being a supporter. But I don't actually use the term feminist in relationship to myself. But again, it's not that important an issue, really. Yeah, Justin, you are right that Justin Trudeau calls himself a feminist, and we now know that Justin Trudeau is also shifty as fuck. He's in the middle of quite a bit of drama at the moment. Had like he promoted the first Indigenous woman to a cabinet position, and then tried to coerce her to help out a mate of his, a company, and she said no, and she resigned but stayed quiet. But then he made some public comment about having her support, and she went, okay, no, that's too far. I stayed quiet, but I don't support you, motherfucker. And she just came out and she made a pretty clear case. I don't know if he'll ever be held accountable. I don't know if he'll be found guilty of corruption, but she made a pretty strong case for him being quite corrupt and trying to force her to behave corruptly. So be careful of who you elevate to knight in shining armor status, because people are flawed. KK, I don't mind if you define me as a feminist. Like, again, it's just, if someone asks me if I call myself a feminist, I'm going to say no, and that's the reason why. But again, it's, to a large extent, it's just semantics, and it's not something I'm going to make a big scene about, because that would be as dumb as making a big scene about, I demand to be called a feminist because I support feminism. It's just a thing. It's a word, and while words have meanings, in very, very, very many cases, the meaning can be fluid, or it can be situational at least. Yeah, David, I mean, I wish we were all in the position that we didn't judge people based on their gender or based on their ethnicity or religion as to how well they could do a particular job. But I mean, we all know that there's massive amounts of prejudice. Even I'll admit to absolutely sometimes unconscious, sometimes conscious prejudices. It's better if it's conscious, because if you're aware, like, ooh, I was kind of thinking that person maybe can't do that because of who they are, maybe I should think about that. I mean, on a really funny level, at least I think it's funny, when my ex was pregnant with our firstborn, getting, you get all the tests done, because everything, and there was a, well, what turned out to be a family legend on her side of the family, that her mum had cystic fibrosis. She'd had lung problems her whole life, and the family had decided it was cystic fibrosis, and that's a genetic inheritable disease. So she wanted to get tests to see if she was carrying the genes, or if the baby would carry them, and so we, GP, who sent us to the OBGYN, and then it's like, okay, this is a genetic thing. So we got referred to a geneticist who could help assess us and maybe do some tests. So we rock on up to the hospital to see the geneticist. This is the specialist, and I swear this doctor was she was a James Bond movie version of a geneticist. She probably looked younger than she was, given how much study you would have to do to get to her level. She was at least late 20s, quite possibly into her 30s. She looked younger than 25, and she almost definitely wasn't. She looked younger than 25, and she's absolutely gorgeous. I swear to God, she was a James Bond movie version of a geneticist. And I'm sitting opposite going, really? Really? You're the one with all the advanced training and really? Really? And I was relieved when Barton walked out and she went, did you feel weird that she was like young and gorgeous, but she was meant to be the genetic specialist? Yes. It was weird because not necessarily expecting a guy to be the geneticist, but expecting them to look older and I don't know, more average. But to see someone who looked like a fucking model who was the geneticist was a really weird experience. Turned out that Max's mum didn't have cystic fibrosis, didn't do any tests, and just said, "Oh, everyone thinks mum's got cystic fibrosis. How old's your mum?" Like, you know, and she's like 60 at this point. Go, she doesn't have cystic fibrosis. She would have been dead for 30 years if she had cystic fibrosis. And it's like, oh, okay. This is probably just asthma or some other lung disease. So yeah. But yes, that was my experience with a James Bond geneticist. So Catherine, you're not sexist again, man. Guy came up to in the street in town, asking a question. Oh, put his hand on you. Yeah, no. The touching. What is that? And every woman I know says that happens to them. Everyone. There's no one it hasn't happened to. Complete strangers, or possibly slightly worse, people in the workplace unnecessarily touching them. And it's like, what the fuck? Oh. Oh yeah, Keiko, I'm 100% on board with that. Patriarchy is bullshit for men. Patriarchy is what kills men. It's why men do. Ugh. And yes, Mr. Aaron, I need to point out, MRAs seem very focused on straight white men, much less so gay, trans, non-white, disabled men. Yeah, they do not seem to spend a lot of time on that at all. But yeah. Oh yeah, and the public transport thing, Miss Foxification, the leaning on and the rubbing up against them. Oh no, what? Oh, just fucking throw them in a pit somewhere. Hey, look, we're at the halfway mark and I finished my fruit juice. There's more a fruit punch because I mixed up a couple of things. But hey, I had an idea even before starting that the particular cocktail I wanted to make, because I've been doing that. I've been making cocktails in the second half. Yeah. The Toronto Maple, if your mum went to university in the 70s, came from a city in bumfuck nowhere, it's like me. Oh yeah, she's doing really well. Graduated top, nice. Oh yeah, that's an interesting thing. Positive ethnic stereotypes, like Asians do well in something like accounting, and your mum, who's like a white girl from bumfuck nowhere, tops the class. I could see that making Asian guys really narky. Safa, you've done early voting for New South Wales. That I have not been paying enough attention to New South Wales. The most I know is that it looks, polling at the moment is like 50-50, that no one is assured of winning a majority because there could be a lot of independents. So no one's sure if either party is going to have a clear majority and what exactly will happen if there's not. Oh yeah, Charlie, the old man thing. So on one level, you kind of think they're harmless, but they do think they've got the right to, yeah, as you hope, grab a girl or kiss her or say something really crass. It's like, look, as an old man, I'm allowed to do it now. It's just creepy. It's awful. But I'm going to make a drink. I actually decided what I was going to make. So I'm going to get a couple of things. Get an ice cube, for one of my giant ice cubes. It's a giant ice cube tray. Right. Giant ice cube. That. Now, I get the advocate. Yeah. This has been an experiment. So this is another creation we're doing here on that. And that on the brandy. Okay. So I saw, I wanted to make a cocktail with this stuff. This is like an egg-based liqueur, advocate. And I looked up before the show recipes, and there was a lot that had cognac or brandy in. And they kept saying to like put yellow chartreuse in, which I don't have, but I do have absinthe, which is in the same neighborhood as chartreuse, and some had a bit of cherry, and I've got some cherry. So I'm going to make a brandy advocate cocktail with a splash of absinthe and a splash of the cherry liqueur. And we need a name for it. Meow. Meow. Okay, so yeah, okay, hello Mimsy. She's just headbutting me. She's woken up and yes, everyone wants me to give you attention. Everyone loves Mimsy. All right, put the advocate over there and some brandy. You're just going to let me make the drink, Mimsy. I'll give you a pat. Oh, Catherine, you were out at the fringe when someone was creepy. Yeah, it's just... no, I can't even think of anything to say about it. Oh, yeah, sorry. I've seen that one too, Miss Foxification. But I'm not like those guys. Why don't you want my attention? You know, it's like, why is shutting the fuck up so difficult a proposition for so many of these guys? It's like they're really affronted that, no, that complete stranger literally maybe doesn't want to hear a goddamn thing from you. Oh, Lion Spider, I've been in that situation, and it's weird. A woman in the workplace who sexually harasses men, who's really inappropriate, because it's really hard to get people to take it seriously. And it's a really shitty thing for a woman to do because it weakens the position of all the other women in the workforce, because the value judgments are unfair. It's like, oh, well, that's, you know, they all want it type of thing. And I have also been in that position where there's a woman whose behavior was very dubious. And it was almost impossible to get anything done about it because no one had take it seriously. Ugh. No, I'm really sorry that happened, Catherine. It's just like, it's the ignorance of some people does my head in. Oh, Justin, that's the thing that happens in gay clubs. Straight women going into gay clubs thinking they can grope the gay buff dudes, and it's like, no, you can't. That's not actually acceptable behavior. Yeah, it's just, there are people all like, yeah, I mean, you can look at the statistics and go, well, you know, this is the depressing thing. If you're a woman, statistically, you're at most risk from a straight white male, you know, but there are shitty people in every demographic, every ethnic group, every gender, every sexuality. There are horrible, horrible, shitty people everywhere. And highlighting the fact that the overwhelming, it's like when we talk about violence, whether it's domestic violence or just random street violence, like the overwhelming majority of perpetrators are male. That's not saying that there aren't some women who are a problem. And as you say, when the highest risk, you look at America, you are way, to state the clear, provable fact, you are at much higher risk of being killed by a straight white man with a gun than any other group. Everyone's paranoid about terrorists. Terrorism exists. People who murder in the name of Islam exist. Politically violent black people who murder someone in the name of their cause exist. But you're far more likely to be killed by a straight white man with a gun than anyone else. That's just a statistical reality. Pointing that out doesn't say the other dangers don't exist. But it's just weird that we fixate on the fringe, because the fringe stuff is scary. We're terrified about being killed by a shark. The odds of you being killed by a shark are so remote. There are thousands of things that will kill you before a shark will. You're far more likely to be killed slipping over in your bathroom than you are by a shark. And you can reduce the risk of being killed by a shark to zero by not going in the fucking ocean. But we freak out at the idea of shark attack. And it's, you know, we're freaked out about terrorism. But domestic or random street violence is a much higher risk. My drink, it looks a bit like a chocolate milkshake. That's the cherry. It's very dark, the cherry. Anyway. Ooh, that's fun. Oh, that is fun. The Advocate kind of makes it like a dessert. Oh my! I put less than half a shot of the absinthe in there, but wow, it's got a real bite. I was looking, what should we call this? Because I looked at a bunch of things and improvised. Probably, you know, there's a few. There was one called an Ambrosia Cognac, Ambrosia Cocktail, which was cognac, an Advocate, and yellow chartreuse, and some vanilla flavor. And I didn't really do that, did I? With the other cognac, Zabiglione. Oh, okay, see, it's because Advocat really makes it like a dessert. I know that has an egg in it and lemon juice. No, it's definitely not that. It's not really a dessert one. Like a variant on the ambrosia. I think you want to steal a name of something else. There's one that's just called Excellent, that's a very cheesy name. And not that I'm averse to cheesy names. That was, as you may see, did make me laugh a little bit. Ooh, okay. What's this one? Advocat Cognac Grand Marnier. Okay. So one with an orange liqueur, they call an orange custard cocktail. And I use cherries, so I call this a cherry custard cocktail. That's about as much brain power as I want to expend on that. Oh, hey, Wolfer. I haven't seen you before. Wolfer, you just realize that for younger generations, Baby Shark is replacing the Jaws theme as the most well-known piece of music about shark. Someone has to now introduce, someone has to make, because they're still making shark attack movies. They come out every year or so. Someone has to make a movie with a shark eating the people, and as the shark attack's going on and the person's screaming and there's blood everywhere, it's like the studio's playing Baby Shark, do 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 do, Mummy Shark, do 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 do. Dr. Obama, the backstory behind tonight's name. Bill Shorten's a coward. He is. He's a coward. He's the opposition leader. Okay, so for those who don't know, the 15th, which is tomorrow, I think it must be tomorrow everywhere by now. So Friday the 15th is a global climate strike day. It's school kids around the world gotten involved in this campaign to walk out of school, like a school strike, walk out of school and demand action on climate change. And I'm 100% behind it. The fuckhead conservatives here are like, kids gotta stay in school, do it outside of school. And opposition leader Bill Shorten, who will almost inevitably be Prime Minister in a couple of months, is just being a complete fucking wimp. He's so scared to say anything confrontational. So he's going like, oh, if I just don't upset anyone, we'll definitely win. So he's just avoiding saying almost anything confrontational. And yeah, so when he was asked what did he think about the kids doing the climate strike, he says, oh, I encourage kids to get involved, but it would be better if they did it after school or on the weekend. It's like, well, that's what a fucking strike is. You're in the union, you stupid fuck. It's like, if it's outside of school hours, if it's outside of work hours, it's a protest. If you walk off the job, if you walk out of school, it's a fucking strike. It's a different sort of statement. You fucking knob. And that's why I titled this, Bill Shorten's a coward. And the climate strike's great because Bill Shorten is a coward and the climate strike is great. Although the New South Wales opposition leader, who's Labor, who's heading towards an election, he spoke up and said, yay, kids, climate strike, awesome. They're the leaders of tomorrow. So at least he went for it. So line spider, Queensland Labor approved destruction of koala habitat. Queensland Labor, Queensland Liberal, Queensland National, they never say no to development, no matter how destructive it is. It's shit. Nice, Toronto, the University of Waterloo. And Wilfrid Laurier, University of Waterloo, walking out 15th. Good, excellent. I am 100% behind the kids being activists for their own future. The sad folks go, kids are going to be learning, they're going to be in school, learning stuff by repetition. You don't want them thinking, you don't want them acting, you're going to be learning, do what they're told. Fuck that nonsense. Ugh. It's just the level of denialism from conservatives about climate change absolutely does my head in. And they kind of shift with what lie they're telling. Some of them they keep coming back to, like, oh, there are all these scientists who say that climate change isn't happening. Yeah, there's a bunch of people who call themselves scientists. None of them are climate scientists. None of them have done any form of formal study that's been peer-reviewed. Every climate scientist who's done peer-reviewed studies has come to the same conclusion, namely, this is some serious shit. Proto Maple Leaf, is ANZ still funding the Coalport barrier? Probably. I don't know, although some of the banks have realised it is actually quite bad PR for them, and there's probably nothing for them to gain. Like a whole bunch of the banks like refuse to bankroll the Adani mine because it just seemed like a bad deal. Dr. Obama, that is exactly what he's doing it. He's playing it safe. He doesn't want to have drama because he's a fucking coward. Call me crazy, call me an idealist. I want someone who is something more than not that guy. I want someone to stand. I want someone to represent a cause. I want someone to have some fucking guts. Look, there is, in my mind, no question about which way the next election has to go. Like, the Conservatives need to be crushed, not just lose. They need to be crushed. They need to learn this ridiculous fringe ultra-right stuff they're doing, the homophobia, the misogyny, it's not just climate change denial, it's science denial generally. They need to know this is not a winning electoral strategy. So it needs to be more than they lose this election. They need to be fucking crushed. And look, I do actually believe a Labor government will probably put in place a number of good policies. It's just that Shorten is doing this gutless shit that I think isn't good enough. People deserve someone who's standing for something. People deserve a leader who gets a job for a better reason than it's not as bad as that guy. And I've said it a lot of times, Shorten's a fucking coward. Shorten has done nothing more than say, I'm not that guy for the last however many years. And it turns out that's a winning strategy. Who knew? So I will not back down from saying Shorten's a fucking coward and Australia deserves better. Safa, who wants Albo as PM? Well, that's the other thing. I don't think Shorten ever deserved to be leader because Shorten was an integral part in knifing Rudd to put Gillard in power and then knifing Gillard to put Rudd back in power. He was core to that shit and he should have been punished for it, not rewarded. So, yes, misrepresentation with the wordplay, Gina Weinhard. She is awful. Albanese is a bit more sort of old school Labor lefty. I don't know that much about him, but I am 100% of the view that Shorten never deserved to be Labor leader. Doesn't deserve to be Prime Minister. He's going to be, and I remain hopeful that a government led by him will actually do some good stuff. But he himself, I'm not going to shy away for a second, he's a fucking coward. And excusing this like, oh, we don't want to upset anyone. I'm just not on board with that at all. I'm not on board with, oh, we don't want to give them anything to attack us. It's just like, that's just fucking piss weak. It is absolutely a winning strategy. I won't argue that. I won't argue that it's a winning strategy because I think it is. It's just people deserve better. You know, call me an idealist. Call me a fool. People do every day. Nah. Shorten's going to have to really fucking get it into, and he has shown he has the capability to actually stand for something. So I think it's more than possible that, say, after their first term, I'll be saying, oh no, Shorten Prime Minister, oh, thumbs up, definitely did the right thing. I think it's more than likely that after the first term, I will be more supporting. Oh, Dr. Obama, there's no way Labor's ever going to knife a leader again. You're wondering if he'll last as PM? He lasted as opposition leader when he lost an election because he did quite well. Almost won. You know, the government only had a 1-seat majority. I have no evidence for this whatsoever, but I firmly believe all the Labor power brokers have spent a lot of time over the last couple of years in back rooms just smashing out all their differences. You see what's happening to the Libs with this fucking leadership fighting, and we started it and they carried it on. The public fucking hates us, hates that. If we ever do it again, the public will crucify us. So when we have disagreements, and we will have disagreements, we have to sort that shit out behind closed doors. We have to. It can't be public. We can't be bad-mouthing our leader. So when we've got to sort something out, we've got to do it behind closed doors. I think Labor's been having some really hard discussions behind closed doors because they have not been having any fights in public. They've no fights in public. So I reckon behind closed doors, they've just been smashing all their differences out. Well, that's a good question. Will the Libs get Wentworth back? I don't think they will. I think, well, I could be wrong, but I think the Independent will hold Wentworth. I think the Liberals are going to lose a lot of seats. Well, a lot might be an exaggeration, but I think they will lose several more seats to Independents. Hopefully Abbott's seat, yes, Abbott has to go, miscommunication. He is a cancer on Australian public life. Agree with that 100%. I've seen a couple of people bring up Penny Wong a couple of times, and she is probably my favourite Australian politician because she does not take shit from anyone. And while she's my favourite Australian politician, when people say, oh, she should be Prime Minister, I would not wish that on her. We saw what happened to Gillard as Prime Minister. And as she said in her farewell speech, the sexism wasn't everything, but it wasn't nothing. There was rampant sexism against her, even though people kept lying and saying that wasn't their motivator. A lot of people, including within Labor ranks and Labor voters, extreme sexism. They had a problem with, oh, that bitch telling me what to do. So when we've seen how much sexism gets leveled against an extremely competent and hardworking female Prime Minister, you say, what happened to her just because she's female? And you say, oh, Penny Wong should be him. Oh, so an Asian lesbian. Yeah, I can't see that going badly for her at all. I wouldn't wish it on her. She doesn't need that shit. She has a family. She doesn't need that shit fucking destroying her life. And anyone saying that Wong wouldn't be attacked for her sexuality and her heritage is full of shit. It would be a fucking nightmare. And we would see racism and homophobia increase so much in Australia. But she does remain my favourite politician, I think, because when she gets the fire going in the Senate, and I'll always love the hilarious thing she did to Joe Hockey. I think it was in the ABC studios. She was just finishing an interview and Joe Hockey was there to do an interview. And there was a camera there and it was on him. And the studio door opens and Penny Wong comes out. And Joe Hockey does this shit-eating grin and says, "Hi, Penny." And she just looks at him and rolls her eyes and goes, "Ugh." And walks away. She didn't verbally, like he did the "Hi, Penny," and she didn't talk to him. She rolled her eyes and made just a disgusted grunt at him. It was absolutely beautiful. But when she, oh man, when she's in the Senate, when she's on fire in the Senate, when, you know, like she won't play by their nicey comments, she'll just fucking go them with, "How dare you? How dare you?" And I am a huge fan. I love it. But yes, as silly and trite as it is, I'll always like her for the time she treated Joe Hockey how he deserved to be treated. It was just, he's so weak and pathetic. And he's just, "Hi, Penny." And she just rolled her eyes and, ugh. It's just absolutely hilarious. Oh yeah, Miss Foxification, she's the leader in the Senate. Whether you made a deputy, I think Tanya Plibersek is a good deputy. I think she's a good performer in the Labor Party. Yeah, Labor unfortunately lost a couple of people who could have been very good for their future because they were Gillard supporters who said, "If you turn on Gillard, I resign. That's it. Okay, this is bullshit. We can't do it. If we knife Gillard, I resign." And they knifed Gillard, and I forget how many it was, but it was 3 or 4, stayed true to their word and went, "Okay, fuck all of you." And they resigned. David, I agree. Doug Cameron, he's funny. He's the Scots guy, isn't he? It's always fun seeing an old guy with he's a unionist with a Scots accent ripping into the fucking Tories. Dr. Obama, who do I want to replace Hockey as USA ambassador? Look, ambassadorships are just fucking cushy jobs for the boys. Hell, give it to Gillard. I don't know. Is she looking for a gig? I'd be quite pleased to think Gillard was representing me overseas. Don't know if that's something she has any. Oh, fucking rub Hockey's nose in it. Give it to Rudd. Yeah, that would just infuriate the Conservatives. Kick fucking Hockey out and put Rudd in. That would be hilarious. Really, David? I did not know that about Plibbers. Her husband was an ex-dealer who did jail time. I did not know that. But she's deputy leader now. She'll be deputy leader in, I'm almost sure she'll be deputy leader in the new government. Ah, Elizabeth May from the Canadian Greens got arrested protesting an oil pipeline. Yeah, I mean, Penny Wong's much more a party machine person than, you know, like a Green who's going to do much more outrageous things. Like, you know, Penny Wong towed the line under the Gillard government when the Gillard government wouldn't push for marriage equality, and that was a classic example of just how shit politics is. Because I reckon Gillard pulled Penny Wong aside and said, "Okay, you know me, I'm not religious." That was the other thing. Gillard as PM, she's obviously an atheist. She wasn't married. She's just shacked up with a dude, which was hilarious. I think it's obvious Gillard is a supporter of marriage equality. You know, she's not religious. She's not conservative. But she just had too many fires to fight, and she was under so much pressure. I think she just had to have a word with Penny Wong and say, you know, I'm not actually opposed to it, but I just can't have another fucking culture war fight. We're barely keeping her head above water as it is. And Penny Wong swallowed it. Just went, okay, I'm going to toe the party line. The idea that Penny Wong wouldn't stand up for herself and toed the party line instead. Jesus. But that's, I also need to make clear, I don't defend Gillard for that. I think it's shitty, but it's just a classic example of just how shitty politics gets. It is a classic example of how shit politics is. Justin, you want to send Rudd to Taiwan? Oh my God, that would be hilarious because he loves China. And that was one of the things that really went in his favor. And there was some hilarious stuff in the lead up to the election, like when he was running against Howard, and when they met with Chinese government delegation, and while they're there with the media, Rudd is speaking to them in their own language, which is going down a treat with the Chinese. And you can just see Howard standing there looking really uncomfortable, like, I don't speak a word of anything apart from English. And that was wild, seeing that in action. It's an interesting one, Suffer. China loved Rudd but hates Scummo. Look, there are very, very, very big dangers with being too chummy with China. You don't want to make an enemy of China for a whole bunch of reasons, but you don't want to be too chummy either. You know, there's no getting around. China's a ruthless totalitarian regime. You really don't want to be too chummy with him. Hey, Dirk. Hey, you met the Queensland Minister for Emergency Services. That's interesting. What was the context? Were you in an emergency, or was it just random, or was it a political thing? What are you doing, Mimsy? Are you going for a walk, or are you going to sit on my lap? Dr. Obama, did Howard's seat of Bennelong have a strong Asian community? I don't know. I'm leaning towards saying no. It's on the north shore of Sydney. I wouldn't swear to it, but my initial thought is no. I didn't think that was a strong Asian community. But if someone was to put some stats in front of me to show I was wrong, I'd accept that because I don't know. Yeah. Well, see, David, why the totalitarian communists in China do capitalism very well is because they do it in a state-controlled way. It's a state-controlled capitalist-ish market. So, yeah. Oh, Dirk, you work for the SES. Okay. So it was a media opportunity, show the shiny new vehicles. Nice. Miss Fox, question. I don't know how bad things are in China for the unfavored. Like there's a ruling class and a middle class. I know, oh God, if you like, we now know they have re-education camps for the Uyghurs, the Muslim minority. That's the other funny thing. A lot of people treat China as if it's amorphous. It's China, but it's fucking huge. And there is so much difference in the people from one corner to the other. And treating China like everyone's the theme in China is ridiculous. And like I said, now we know they've got re-education camps to beat the Islam out of the Uyghur Muslim minority. But yeah, I think you're right, Miss Foxification. Even just being from the country, it's like move to the city and work in a factory or you're fucked. Justin, I don't what is it like in Hong Kong now? Because of course Hong Kong was a British protectorate for so long, and then there was a long drawn out thing where there ended up being an agreement with the British handing Hong Kong back to China, and China had a largely hands-off thing with Hong Kong, but not really. So I don't know what it's really like in Hong Kong. I'd like to know more about one of my enduring regrets is I never traveled to China before the modernization. Like I'm old enough, I could have gone to China in early 90s, 80s for that matter, and I would have seen all the major cities with all the old cities still intact. And now that's all gone and it's all the modern buildings. That will be an enduring regret of mine that I never saw China before modernization, which is again a slightly to extremely creepy Western obnoxious behavior. Like, ooh, I could have seen this little prism of the world in the past that these people living in and not the modern world. But, you know, I never claim to be perfect. I have some Western imperialist attitudes. Oh, Taiwan is a very dodgy area. As far as the people of Taiwan are concerned, they're independent. As far as the people of China, the government of China, the Communist Party, are concerned, they own Taiwan. So that's a very hot button issue. That is a very hot button issue. But there's all sorts of fun shit happening in that part of the world with people claiming territorial rights over bits of like the ocean and islands and passages that we don't call them freight container ships, and there's a lot of disagreement on that. China says they have territorial rights here, and Japan says, well, we have territorial rights here, and Korea says we have territorial rights here, and a few others, and it's a pretty fucking hot button issue. There's a lot of tension around that, and every now and then the US ramps up the tension as well. Go, no, fuck you, China. We've got the right to send our warships into this water. And China's going, no, you don't. That's our territorial water. And America goes, no, it's not. There was a period where people were quite worried about that. And it's like other things have pushed it off the front pages, but it would not take much for there to be a really rapid escalation of tension in South China Sea and through into Asia, when the competing interests of China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and other nations, like I said, it's the Kashmir problem. And wasn't it a relief when things calmed down a little between India and Pakistan? I don't know how calm they are at the moment, but fuck, two nuclear powers who super hate each other, getting really fucking aggressive. That was a little bit of excitement, wasn't it? Dr. Obama, next month, the 30th anniversary of when nothing happened in Tiananmen Square. Oh, God, that's a Simpsons joke I really laughed at. There's a cheesy tourist souvenir you can get. I've seen it in a lot of places. It's like, you get plaques saying what happened in a place. I've seen this a few times in tourist places. And you can buy one to put in your hand, and the plaque says, on 15th of June, 1982, on this spot, nothing happened. It's like, it's a joke. Got it from a tourist place, nothing happened. But when the Simpsons had their episode in China, when, God, I forget which one it was, Patty or Selma adopting a baby, when they visit Tiananmen Square, it had the date of the momentous events in Tiananmen Square, and it had one of these little plaques that said, on this spot, on this date, nothing happened. And that's a fucking dark joke, right? Do not go near my cocktail, Mimsy. She's just out of camera, but you can see her. She decided my cocktail smelt interesting. Don't you misbehave, Miss Mimsy. Yeah, and God, the 30th anniversary. That happened when I was at university. Yeah, the potential for something heavy to happen on the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen Square is pretty high, I would have thought. Oh yeah, David, you're absolutely right. In China, they're very 1984 with their rewriting of history, with the blanking of shut the fuck up, Justin, you turned 30 this year. Maybe your parents were having sex when they heard about Tiananmen Square. Huh? Maybe. Speaking of the rewrite history, I mean, there are the obvious ones we see and we called out, like the dictators in China control information, North Korea, they control information. But holy fuck, you go to Japan, the average Japanese person does not know the shit the Japanese Imperial Army got up to in World War II. One of the more striking ones I saw was in Hawaii. It was a Pearl Harbor anniversary, and it was a big one. It's probably the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. This is a while ago, but I remember it. And one of the American news networks, because Hawaii is a very popular tourist destination, a lot of Japanese tourists. And it was like the 50th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. And so they were going to the beaches near Pearl Harbor, finding Japanese tourists, young Japanese tourists, and saying, hey, how are you? Enjoying your holiday? Yep. This area, Pearl Harbor? Yep. And they're saying to these young Japanese people, do you know anything significant, anything at all about Pearl Harbor? And they just looked at them blankly and went, nice beach. Because it's not only not taught in Japan, the fucking criminality of the Japanese Empire and the Imperial Army in the lead up to World War II and through World War II, it is not only not taught in Japanese schools, it's actively suppressed. And the ultra right-wing conservatives in Japan are very active in rewriting history, basically calling war criminals heroes, denying the atrocities of the Imperial Army during World, right through from the rape of Nanking, down through Southeast Asia, through the trafficking of women they captured, through to the torture and murder of prisoners of war. It's just non-stop atrocities from the Japanese Imperial Army, and that is actively suppressed in Japan. It's kind of funny, like my kids have always liked anime as they grew up. We watched a lot of Studio Ghibli. Now they're young adults, they watch everything and anything. But when they're a bit older, we watched Barefoot Gen. There are two really desperately sad and moving anime about Hiroshima. One is Barefoot Gen, and the other one is Grave of the Fireflies. And I got a double disc set of Barefoot Gen and Barefoot Gen 2. And it was about just how civilians of Hiroshima coped after the bombing and, in fact, after the war. And, you know, it's bleak as fuck and it's awful and whatnot. And the kids are going, oh, this is awful. And I actually felt compelled to tell them, like, I don't feel like this movie is telling any lies, because what the civilians suffered was terrible, but it isn't telling you what the Japanese imperial forces did. And what they did was terrible. So it is literally only telling one side of the story. I don't think they're lying as such, but they're definitely only telling one side of the story. Yes. Lion Spider, that's an interesting one. Your ex's stepmom was in the Chinese army, was upset when she realized how much China lies. That's the thing with people who escape from authoritarian power, and particularly if they were true believers, when they realize it was all lies. This is like whether in the Soviet Union or former Soviet states, in Russia, East Germany, all those places, when the people who had been true believers realize the extent to which they were lied to, it's pretty goddamn harsh. Charlie, I looked that up the other day. See, Lion Spider, when you're saying internment camps, you're talking about Cowra. That was actually a prisoner of war camp. I think what Charlie's talking about is the internment of Japanese civilians. And thousands of civilians were interned in Australia. I looked this up just the other day because I didn't really know. And it wasn't just people who were resident in Australia who were either citizens or descendants of, you know, the hostile nations, but also Britain shipped out a bunch of troublesome Germans. But they were really worried about supporters of Germany, and they actually shipped thousands of Europeans to Australia to be interned for the duration of the war. And I didn't know that. Like the American internment of Japanese citizens is famous. And I honestly wasn't sure if Australia did internment of citizens, and we did. Thousands of them. And even after World War II, when we got a huge wave of refugees from Europe, a lot of them spent a long time in resettlement camps before they were allowed into the general population. There's a lot of tension about that too. Toronto Maple, what happened with the pamphlets? This is the thing that happened. Americans dropped pamphlets on somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen cities. They didn't just drop pamphlets on Hiroshima. They dropped pamphlets on somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen cities, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki were among them. And the things basically said, if the government doesn't surrender, we are going to deploy a weapon that will level the city, and it could be your city. Get out of the city. And virtually no one left because or they didn't believe it, or the government said they couldn't. And then the first bomb landed, and the Americans then did a second wave of leaflet drops to multiple cities. See, they didn't say Hiroshima and they didn't say Nagasaki because then the Japanese could have concentrated all their defenses there. But after the first bomb, they did another wave of leaflet drops in multiple cities and said, we just destroyed Hiroshima. The government hasn't surrendered. If the government doesn't surrender, we're going to do it to another city. It could be your city. Get out of the city. Again, no one really left, or they weren't allowed to leave. Then Nagasaki, bang. And then the Japanese surrendered because the Americans said they were going to keep doing it. But that's the thing that not many people know, that the Americans did actually do leaflet drops and say, we're going to destroy a city. Justin, we have internment camps offshore. We have fucking torture camps offshore. I think what we are doing to refugees now is worse, significantly worse than what we did with enemy state people during World War II, because what we're doing to the people in our offshore camps is fucking torture. It's criminal. It's absolutely disgusting. Dr. Obama, Duterte in the Philippines is a piece of shit. Okay, I didn't hear that one. Is he, why am I not surprised he's a Marcos fan? Of course he's a Marcos fan. I am, my first visit to the Philippines, you know, everything was, I never went there during the Marcos years, but of course they had huge problems with communist insurgents against the dictatorship of Marcos. And the main cities and stuff were very militarized. And I went to speak people and sort of touring the provinces, as they call them. And in one of the small towns, as we turned off a road, there was a bunker. It's the only way to describe it, was a bunker. And there was a setup, obviously, to put a roadblock in, to put a barrier in. And they told me, like, oh yeah, that's a police station now. But during the dictatorship, when there was a lot of threat from the communists, that was actually a military bunker. And they did have a roadblock here. They would search every vehicle that came through here because it's heading towards Manila. And the insurgents were mainly in the provincial areas. And so I was there a couple of decades after the Marcos dictatorship was ended. And it was funny seeing repurposed military stuff. Like, because the Americans had left, or been told they had to leave, I think 10 years before I visited there. I'm not sure when the Americans got turfed. But, you know, I got taken to a country club. It's called Club John Hay. It was a golf club, country club. Only the rich people got to go there. They had these security guards with big guns. And then they told me, oh, this was an American army base. It was Camp John Hay. And they just changed the name to Club John Hay because now it's a provincial golf club where rich people go for a weekend away. And like I said, they have really heavily armed guards. And yeah, that's where the rich people go. the army camp that got turned into a golf club. It's a fascinating place, the Philippines. But yeah. Oh God, Duterte's a piece of shit. The stuff he did, the war against drugs, where he just made it open season, murder people, but say they were a drug dealer, and then it's okay. It's like, yeah, nothing could possibly go wrong when the president says you should murder anyone who's a drug dealer. So anyone who has a grudge against someone kills them and says they were a drug dealer. And the fucking police and military are so corrupt, and they kill anyone who gets in their way and go, they were a drug dealer. Not saying that some of them weren't, but just the mass killings is just ridiculous. I know that, Dr. Obama. Does Duterte like China? I had no idea he wanted to sort of bond with China. It's weird because, for those who don't know, the Philippines is an archipelago, hundreds of islands, and a little bit further south is Indonesia, the world's our nearest neighbor to the north, and the world's most populous Muslim country. And Indonesia is also an archipelago of many, many islands. And you get a slightly contested area in the south of the Philippines and the north of Indonesia, and most notably, the island of Mindanao. Philippines is basically the most Catholic place in the world. It's more Catholic than Italy or Spain. It's because it was a Spanish province. But Philippines is super Catholic, but to their south is a super Muslim country. And you get this crossover point. And one of the most contentious is the island of Mindanao. It's the only, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the only Philippine island that's majority Muslim. And they keep trying to break away from Philippines, and Indonesia keeps giving the Muslim insurgents weapons so they can cause grief for the Philippines government. It's a very fucking fraught thing. Oh yeah, Chronic, there is a cult in the Philippines that at Easter they do the nailing to the cross is the one that gets all the props. And they literally nail someone to a cross and parade them through the streets. But accompanying them are the flagellants. It's these people who whip themselves. It's this big procession. They whip themselves, and they're not fucking messing about. They rip the flesh off their back. I've done a lot of government work over the years, and one guy I knew was he was like a lifelong public servant. He'd done some time in the Philippines, and he talked about when they had to sort of drive through one of these Easter parades where all the flagellants were, and they sort of had to thread through them. And when they got to where they're going and they got out of their car, the sides of the car were just coated in blood and gore. Like the flagellants ripped the skin off their back and sprayed blood everywhere. So when they didn't realize it as they were driving through them, but they were getting blood and gore all over their car. And they got to like the like Foreign Office, and they parked, and their car just had blood sprayed all over it. It was apparently pretty full on. Philippines, fabulous place. I love it, but complex. A lot of issues there. Yes, Australia helps the Philippines. I think you're right, Lion Spider. Australian Army would have helped with some training. The Americans are very big on sending advisors to the Philippines to train the army against the Muslim insurgents in the south, as I said, particularly in Mindanao. Yeah, it's a pretty full-on place. Filipino people are wonderful. And this is the other interesting, when we think of Filipino people, we think of brown-skinned Southeast Asian looking people. But the indigenous people of the Philippines are Pacific Islanders. They're very dark. There are a couple of indigenous races that are still there as a very small minority in the Philippines. When we think of who we think of as Filipino people, they're the people who've mixed, like the indigenous people with the Southeast Asian seafarers, with the Spaniards who conquered the Philippines in the past. That's where the name comes from. So it's named after King Philip of Spain, Republic de Filipinas. And, you know, the Americans liberated the Philippines in the 1800s, I think, from the Spanish. And then they said, yes, you're liberated and now we own you. And they eventually kicked Americans. But yeah, what we think of when we think of Filipino, sort of brown-skinned Southeast Asian, is actually a mix of the indigenous Filipino people, the other Southeast Asian seafarers, the Spanish, and more latterly the Americans. So yeah, but it is a fantastic country with just such an amazing history, and it's beautiful as well. Some of the islands there are so beautiful with these sparkling white sands and whatnot. But anyway, oh yeah, Justin, there'd be Chinese as well, because the Chinese were big seafarers. There's Malay seafarers, Chinese seafarers, probably even some Japanese, but basically all the Southeast Asian seafarers. But yeah, what we broadly regard as what a Filipino looks like is the result of centuries of race mixing, basically. Whereas the indigenous people of the Philippines look much more like Pacific Islanders. They're very dark. But anyway, that's a fun note to end on. I just noticed it's after 10 o'clock. Time flies as it always does with you wonderful people. So I am going to bid you one and all farewell for the evening. I hope you all look after yourselves. Friday tomorrow, and then the weekend. So yeah, I hope you all look after yourselves. Take care. Hope to see you again soon. We'll see if I get motivated to make a TFU Friday video after work tomorrow, or if I just like crash out with some cocktails and maybe make a video on the weekend. Look at Mimsy's going to sleep. You see her head nodding like she's listening to music. She does that when she's falling asleep. Good night to everyone, Mimsy. Yeah, so we're going to bed. Good night, everyone. Thank you for your time. As always, I have thoroughly enjoyed spending time with you. You're awesome people. Be good to yourself. Hope to see you again soon. And I will say goodbye for now. Click the stop button